Whether you're new to the franchise, a veteran collector, or just haven't touched your Skylanders in years, there's a strong case to play every Skylanders game in 2025. And in this video, I'll be going through each game one by one and explaining why I think now is a great time to play and collect figures even so many years later for each individual game. Without further ado, let's jump right into it with Spyro's Adventure. Spyro's Adventure being the first game in the franchise means that a lot of people didn't actually play it. A lot of people jumped on with later entries, which were by far more expensive than Spyro's Adventure. So Spyro's Adventure is actually a cheaper game to go back to and play through. If you want to go back and start collecting for Spyro's Adventure because you never played it when you were younger, it's a very cheap one. It is definitely the cheapest game in the franchise. I've seen lots that are literally the entire roster for Spyro's Adventure for under $40. So yeah, it is definitely a much better deal, especially when compared to the later games in the franchise like Trap Team and Imagineers, which gets super expensive. And Spyro's Adventure gives you the opportunity to experience the humble beginnings of the Skylanders franchise. At first, it wasn't expected to take over the world, so it was more of a humble little game that was just kind of there, and it ended up exploding. But this game is awesome. There really is a sense of magic as it is the first game in the franchise, and a lot of your favorite Skylanders, Trigger Happy, Gill Grunt, Stealth Elf, they all originated from this game. I think it's amazing to go back and experience Spyro's Adventure if you've never played it. There's also really good NPCs and a really good story in this game. A lot of the NPCs get a little more whack and weird and kind of like out of the box when you go later on into the franchise. In the first entry, Spyro's Adventure, really all the NPCs fill their role perfectly, and I think they all work very well together. Spyro's Adventure is absolutely a game I would recommend anyone to play in 2025 as it is not too expensive and it's a great way to start. Then we go on to Giants, which is really considered peak Skylanders by tons of the Skylanders community. So many people can recognize Giants as the best all-around game. It really just feels like a direct improvement on everything in Spyro's Adventure. The story, you could say Spyro's Adventure's story is a little bit better. I think they're really on par in my personal opinion. The Giants gameplay is just better though. There's more combat, more enemies, better enemy types. The gameplay just feels better. There's also difficulty modes now, so you can actually have a much harder experience if you're into that. There's hard, nightmare, and there's easy if you want to set it to easy. So yeah, it gives you more options. I would say there's a lot more variety and replayability here with Giants because of that. Of course, there's a great story here. There's great levels. A lot of the levels are very unique and diverse, and they're fun to play through, and the music is fantastic. I love the music in this game. Once again, Skylanders Giants is one of the cheapest games out there. There's only a few rare figures, and all of them like light core pop fizz. Like, it's a light core, you can just get normal pop fizz, you don't have to worry about that. So this game is still, if you want to get every single playable Skylander, it is not going to break the bank in Skylanders Giants. This is another pretty accessible one. It is just absolutely peak. So many people love this game, and for good reason. It's a fantastic Skylanders game, and you can actually see the beginning of gimmicks with Giants. Giants had the first ever gimmick being the Giants. It's not the craziest idea, but it does show you what would later evolve into these much more complex gimmicks in future games. The Giants, they aren't anything too crazy, but it does show you just where the franchise started off with their gimmicks. Swap Force is one that I think is definitely worth giving a shot because it was such a drastic change up for the Skylanders franchise. I've made an entire video going in depth into all the different changes that Swap Force made and how it pretty much reinvented the entire franchise. Swap Force was completely different than Spyro's Adventure and Giants. And because of that, there is a large number of people out there who consider this the best Skylanders game, which I can definitely understand where they're coming from. Me personally, I don't fully agree with that, and I think there are a lot of games out there in this franchise that are better than Swap Force, but I think Swap Force does a lot of cool things and it makes a bunch of changes, some of which are reverted on, some of which are kept, that really change up the franchise and make it feel completely different. They added a jump button in this game, which pretty much changes it from a dungeon crawler to a platformer in some sort of sense, so that's really cool to see. I would say this game has the most fun and interactive gimmick, being actually able to swap the Skylanders physical figures and then it works the same in game is incredible to see. That is such a cool gimmick. Even to this day, it is absolutely awesome. When I show my friends it, it blows them away how that actually works. And the roster in Swap Force is huge. You have 16 of these swappers, which, you know, that's the size of the entire Giants roster in and of itself. And then you have 16 cores. This is a 32 Skylander roster, the same as Spyro's Adventure, although half of them are gimmick Skylanders this time. And you can make 256 combinations. It is crazy. There's a lot here with Swap Force. It did change up the NPCs, levels, the gameplay, and the art style. Pretty much everything in this game is different, so it feels very different. Levels feel longer. It feels like you're in these zones for a very long amount of time. If you like that, then you'll probably like Swap Force. The combat in this game also has Hit Stop, which feels very different than Giants and Trap Team and Imagineers. This game feels very different in a lot of ways. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is really up to you. This is also a more expensive one to get into. I would say try it out. If you like it, invest more money into it. As the more swappers you get, you'll have exponentially more fun playing around with this gimmick and with this game. This is an awesome experience, but it's not for everyone. But I 100% think it's worth a shot and would recommend anyone to try out Swap Force, at least to see if they like it. And then Skylanders Trap Team is the next one up. And this is such a divisive one because this is the fan favorite Skylanders game. Most people, I would not say most people, but I would say this game definitely has the largest amount of people who would consider it their favorite Skylanders game over any other one. There's a ton of nostalgia behind this game, and it introduced a lot of really cool stuff. The gimmick was absolutely amazing, and so many people liked it. This game has arguably the best roster out there. It is my personal favorite roster. The Trap Masters and the cores are absolutely awesome. The villains that you get to trap and play as make the roster feel that much bigger because you have a bunch of playable villains this time around. First time you're able to play as villains in this franchise, and it stuck around for the rest of the franchise. You were able to play as villains in every game after this, and it's awesome. Trap Team did so much with the franchise. It went back on a lot of the negative changes that I would say Swap Force added. Levels were quick and snappy this time, and they really did keep you engaged the entire time around, especially with the constant boss fights and the gimmick of being able to trap those villains and then use them. The roster was amazing, and they added 2 new elements, Light and Dark, which each had their own cores, levels, traps, villains. It was awesome, and of course they had Trap Masters as well. Nightlight and Nightmare are pretty much universally loved. Everyone seems to like these Skylanders. This game is awesome. Skylanders Trap Team is such an awesome game, and there really are so many iconic villain fights and story moments that come from this game. I love the story in this game of all the Doom Raiders slowly getting picked off, and then Chaos taking his revenge and trying to take over the world by himself after the Doom Raiders did him wrong. It's awesome. I loved it. The only drawback to this game is how expensive a lot of the figures can be. It is much pricier than the original 2 games to collect for Trap Team, but other than that, the game is absolutely a fantastic experience, and I would recommend it to anyone to start off their Skylanders adventure. And then we get to probably the most controversial one, which is Superchargers. I would say this is the most modern feeling Skylanders games. There's so many modern improvements here. There's a lot of quality of life improvements as well. There's online multiplayer. There's racing, which takes up like half the entire game, so it feels like 2 games in one here. There's a lot of small changes here and there. You can reset the paths of your Skylanders. You can switch upgrade paths. You can do a lot of cool things here and there in Superchargers that I feel like were just features that were added to every modern game, but Skylanders were living in the past before this. And so it was cool that Superchargers actually adapted what had become more modern. It implemented a ton of different improvements into the gameplay, and it did have a fantastic story. Superchargers' story was absolutely amazing. The evolution of the darkness and these story moments that felt like they actually carried weight. Glumshanks' death actually made people sad. It was cool to see something like this in Skylanders, which is a kid game. And the darkness's entrance at the end after the credits roll, when he sucks all the credits into a void and comes back for one final fight, is fantastic. Even if that boss fight is absolutely horrible, it's still such a cinematic moment. This game is also very cheap to 100% complete. If you want to experience everything this game has to offer, you only need the 3 vehicle types. So you need a sea vehicle, a land vehicle, and a sky vehicle. I'm pretty sure they did add elemental vehicle gates in a post-game, in a post-launch update. So those are something there as well if you like that extra content. It is still not that expensive to get a supercharger of each element, and there were some release issues with this game to make Skylanders like Thrillipede and Double Dare Trigger Happy somewhat expensive, but other than that, there really isn't too much too expensive from this game, and it is really cool. The roster in this game, I absolutely love it. There's also racing, which is a completely different type of gameplay that you can play on the side. I think the racing mode is really fun, even though I'm not personally a big fan of the vehicle segments in the main game. I think the racing side mode is a really fun addition. You can play it online if the servers are still up on the console that you play on, and it's awesome. Superchargers added a ton, and don't even get me started on the villain cups, which let you play and race against villains. Those are just so awesome as well. Superchargers does have a lot going for it, but it is the most hated game in the franchise for a few different reasons. The vehicle gimmick felt really uninspired to a lot of people and really didn't make sense with Skylanders, which does create some controversy around this game. But if you are someone who enjoys racing segments in games, then you'll like Superchargers, and I would definitely recommend it to you. And then Imaginators, I would say, is the only game, if you had to skip one of these, Imaginators would be the game I'd recommend to skip. Even though it's my personal favorite game in the series, that is a very hot take. Most people do not like Imaginators. The problem is it is so expensive. And even if you already have a bunch of figures from past games. Imaginators makes them all feel so weak and so hard to use and so hard to get anywhere with. The Senseis, which are the new Skylanders that Imaginators brought out, are really the only ones that feel like they're worth using in this game. And the problem is, they're all super expensive. Chompy Mage is the most extreme example of this. He's like $1,000, Robo's like $600, Wildstorm's like $250, Chain Reaction's like $50, Blastertron's like $50, Pinata's like $50. Of course, there's some that are like $10, $15, $20, but those don't feel like they're that much of the roster. Half the roster feels like they're $30 and over, which is crazy, especially considering some of them are in the hundreds of dollars. This game in general also just feels kind of cheap and feels like it reverted on a lot of the good changes that Superchargers made, although I think not having vehicle segments was a much needed change to take it back to core Skylanders and eliminate the vehicle segments throughout the game. I think that was absolutely awesome. I'm glad they did that, but other than that, the story just does not feel that good. There are a few reasons that I think you would play this game though. I think the fully fleshed out playable villains are absolutely amazing and you love to see them here. I love the fully fleshed out figures and the fully fleshed out movesets for all these villains to make them actual Skylanders. It's awesome. I also think the combat and the gimmick in this game are peak. I absolutely love the gameplay and the combat and actually fighting. I think the roster feels amazing to use and the combat in this game was perfected and the gimmick is awesome. You get to make your own Skylander. It's debatable how good the character creator is. I personally really like it. I think it was done very well for what you can really do with Skylanders. Maybe a few more and more diverse battle classes would have helped out, but I think they did as good as they can. And the figures for this game are fantastic. I absolutely love how the figures look. Imaginators did a lot of good, but at the end of the day, if you were to skip out on one game in this franchise, I would 100% say skip out on Imaginators unless you already have a bunch of old figures that you have sitting in your closet that are from this game. If you haven't played Skylanders in a while and are feeling a little bit nostalgic, I would 100% recommend you bust it out and try out some Skylanders, as you will get a whole wave of nostalgia and I'm sure you'll fall in love. And even if you've never tried this franchise, I think starting out with Swap Force, Spyro's Adventure, and Giants would be a great option to experience some of what this franchise has to offer without breaking the bank. And if you like it, if you like Giants especially, then I'd say consider investing in Trap Team. And if you like Swap Force a lot more, I'd say consider investing in Superchargers and see if you like it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye bye everybody.